Good afternoon to you. Mark Sutton with HurricaneTrack.com here with your off-season edition of the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion. It's President's Day, the 15th of February, 2021, and we have a lot to talk about today. A major historic, it is an unbelievable winter storm affecting a good deal of the South. I've been doing this a long time, been watching the weather ever since I was a kid. We had a lot of cold outbreaks when I was younger because the climate has changed. Who's changed it and why? That's not what we talk about here necessarily. But I remember as a kid we did have a lot of cold outbreaks, and there's been less so as I've gotten older. I think we have all, anybody that's 30 years old or older, I think we have noticed the same thing. But this is definitely an attention getter. We saw it coming. It's here. And, well, let's get into it. We'll talk about that as well as hurricane season implications of the current sea surface temperature pattern, some new maps and information from Ben Knoll. We'll take a look at that. Actually, on the other side of today's discussion, the main focus today is going to be this major ice and cold for much of the lower 48. This is a satellite picture here to start things off, a still frame shot. And somebody mentioned on Twitter that it reminded them of the movie The Day After Tomorrow, after the storms had subsided and the astronauts were looking down at the Earth. You remember that? And they were remarking at how clear it was. It was crystal clear. The atmosphere was scoured out. Well, here you go. This is the entire state of Texas, basically, is what it looks like, is covered in snow. I can't find, not every single piece of ground is, but just generally speaking, all of Texas has snow on the ground. It looks like at least a good deal of it. And that is a very rare thing to see. Oklahoma, Kansas, the same way, parts of Louisiana, even areas where Category 4 Hurricane Laura made landfall, Delta last year, Zeta, all along the Mississippi and Louisiana coast there. But Mississippi, we're going to talk about that in a second, but the coastal areas of Louisiana, Cameron, wow, Creole, those areas, Lake Charles, sleet, snow, cold temperatures, bitter cold. Remarkable. It's like 2020, but in the opposite direction. You know what I mean? So last year it was hurricanes. This year we're starting out with incredible winter storms that are very high impact, big time. So let's take a look at a satellite animation, and you can see the snow cover here. The snow cover doesn't move. That's how you know where the snow is versus the clouds. And this is the cold air that's actually pouring down all the way into the southern Gulf of Mexico. This is the snow cover all through here, all the way up on the other side here, the Rockies. Just a huge area of cold air, and that's allowing the winter storm to take shape, and the snowpack and the ice will allow the cold air to remain in place. It's very dense. I talk about it often, that it's like spilling molasses or a thick glue or something, and it just kind of slowly spreads out and oozes. Well, that's what this cold air does. It's very dense and thick in the atmosphere, and just a remarkable situation. Not good, not in a good way. This is very impactful, and it has a very negative impact on a lot of people. And we can see that on the power outage map. And right now, in the state of Oregon, this is from the poweroutage.us site, 328,000 people without power in Oregon. Contrast that. Now, Texas has a lot more people living there, but we're approaching almost 3 million people, 2.8 million people without power in Texas. We knew this was going to be a big event. This is remarkable. Oklahoma, 17,000 people without power. Louisiana now up to 112. Mississippi is going to really skyrocket over the coming hours, I think, because your ice storm is really just getting started. And so you can see the big winners here, or losers, whichever way you want to put it. Texas, Oregon, Virginia. You might be wondering, well, what the heck? Well, they had some ice storm issues over the weekend. So winter weather and the ice all through this region in here, coming out of Canada from that cross-polar flow, the cold air draining down. No surprise. We saw it coming, just like we do with hurricanes. We can see these patterns setting up, well telegraphed in advance, but once it happens to you, I guess you don't really appreciate it until it's upon you. And we do that a lot of things in a lot of things with our lives, and the weather is no different. So there you go. This map a lot more of it's going to become red before all is said and done. If you want to bookmark that, it's a really good website, poweroutage.us. All right, here's another vantage point of all the areas under watches and warnings. The storm system is slowly moving off to the north and east. It's interesting that it's not going to make a trek across the Gulf and then up the east coast like this, that Miller A type. This is more of an inland cutter, whatever you want to call it, that is going to come up this way, generally to the west of and or over the Appalachians. And so the areas to the south and east are chilly and wet, and even some severe weather down here in parts of Florida. We'll zoom in and take a look at that in a moment. But it's just that strong western Atlantic ridge sitting out here, keeping South Florida still very toasty, very summer-like in South Florida. But elsewhere, farther north, cooler, yeah, but just not, the Arctic air is just not able to get over the mountains. And so that's why it's confined to this area right through here. It's just the way the jet stream is set up, and the upper air pattern, and the battling between the polar front over here and the western Atlantic ridge, the polar air mass and the front. And in between is this battle zone of some ice and some snow and some sleet and freezing rain. And then there's more nasty winter weather coming into the Intermountain West, Pacific Northwest. I mean, it's great for snowpack. We talk about this often, that sometimes these winter storms do bring some benefits. With the increased snowpack, you get fresh water that's stored in the snow. But this is kind of excessive here, what we're dealing with as of late. A very impactful February, to say the least. All right, so what's the progress of this? Well, let's check out the GFS here going forward. And you can see, just looking at some of the height lines in here, there's the lowering heights, the big trough in the upper levels of the atmosphere. Here's your surface high of 1041 millibars. So this is your big chunk of thick Arctic air that's come down. And then again, the battle zone right through here between the southeast ridge. And you can see the isobars out here. I was showing this to my daughter the other day, my 5-year-old, and she was asking, well, what are those lines? I was like, well, those are isobars that tells you about the air pressure that keeps pushing on us. And she's like, I don't feel the air pushing on me. I was like, exactly. But it does. And so it's interesting because you can actually see how all of this works if you know what to look for. And it's just amazing once you can kind of see through what's going on, because she looked at it and was thinking, oh, that's just a bunch of lines and colors. She liked the purples, by the way, and those blue colors. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of neat to see, but it means that there's a lot of rough weather going on underneath there. But really, you can clearly see there's the outline of the surface high, at least. This is the surface map of the western Atlantic ridge, or whatever you want to call it, the southeast ridge. And it's extending west just enough. So again, Florida's nice and warm, chilly, with some cold air. I mean, it's February, so you do have some cold air trapped east of the Appalachians, but the true Arctic air, the boundary here, is about like that. And it's just not going to be able to get over that hump, quite literally, to give the East Coast a major snowstorm or a blizzard or whatever. It's just not in the cards. Instead, ice and snow in Houston, all the way up through parts of Louisiana, Mississippi, Arkansas, Missouri, Tennessee, and points north and east from there. As we put this into motion, you'll see how this evolves. Travel nightmares, absolutely. This is through tomorrow morning. Finally, rush hour tomorrow morning. Wet along Jersey, the mid-Atlantic states, because that's in the warm side. It's just that. And look, you can still see the ridge sitting out there. There it is. Strong high pressure out over the western Atlantic. Strong high pressure here. Coming out of Canada. This is a cold Arctic high. This is sort of an extension of your Bermuda high. And they're battling each other. And this is winning out enough to keep the cold air from coming. And I say it over and over. We just don't have the cold air in place. And the cold air does two things. Obviously, deep cold air in the column gives you snow. But the temperature contrast is just lacking. Without that Arctic air getting all the way down into the East Coast proper, all the way down to the coast, you don't have that big temperature contrast between the warm Atlantic, the temperatures of the atmosphere itself, the ocean and the atmosphere, and then the cold, bitter cold energy contrast in energy and temperature, because temperature equates to energy, heat is energy. It's just not there to give the East Coast a big snowstorm or blizzards or whatever. Remember 2015 when the Northeast was just hammered, nor'easter after nor'easter, and it was very, very cold. That's because the jet stream was positioned differently. This is down, I mean, you can clearly see it in the nation's midsection instead of over here, and that is the big difference. So anyway, let's keep on going. This is 24 hours out. Just 24 hours out. Look at that. So then there's a reprieve for about a day. Bitter cold settles in, and then another storm system takes shape with heavy rain, ice and snow, again in some of the same areas, and maybe even some ice and snow this time on the lee side of the Appalachians, the Piedmont area, perhaps of the Carolinas, more so into Virginia. Is it possible that the D.C. area, maybe up through Baltimore, through here, gets in on some ice and sleet and just nastiness? I mean, snow is the best of all the winter weather, like literally, because you can deal with it better. Ice is just completely useless, in my humble opinion. It's very dangerous, and I mean, what are you going to do? So this storm system, again, slides up, because look, there it is. We're at 90 hours out, and there's that ridge sitting out there, the southeast ridge. I'm telling you, these are some clues as to what's coming for hurricane season. That ridge is very stout and very strong. It's far to the south now because the season is still winter. This will move up to the north a little bit more over time. Heights will build up over Canada in the late summer, and then the hurricanes will probably follow. It's getting easier to kind of pick these patterns out. It really is. But I digress. So this goes on through. This is 96 hours. And once again, look, Massachusetts, Long Island, New York, right? Connecticut, Rhode Island, up into Maine. Yeah, maybe some snow there on the backside. But for the Northeast corridor, the I-95 corridor, cold rain, just blech, yuck. Stay home Friday if you can. I mean, most people are still, I guess. But this is just horrible weather. Very miserable, gloomy, yuck. But good times are coming eventually. March will get here, and then spring will arrive. And you can see this 5 days out. The trough shifts a little bit more to the east now, so maybe some colder weather to the eastern side of the Appalachians finally. But there's no storms to take advantage of it. So cold and dry. I'll take the dry at this point because it has been very wet. In the southeast, we're going to start having more river flooding problems, which we will address maybe later in the week. I'll do another video to talk about that. But we've had a lot of rain, and that's going to lead to some river flooding issues. But at least once we get to about the 5-day time frame, the storm, what would you call it? The conveyor belt of storms seems to be abating. All right? All right, so let's move along now. Flipping to tropics, which is very important because we're getting closer. And I know it seems like, well, come on, man, it's still several months away, more than 3.5 months. Yes, that is true. But let me just make sure that I'm very clear. We can see these very interesting patterns ahead of time way better now than we could 10, 15, 20 years ago. And we have these tools, these daily tools, such as the anomaly charts that you can look at daily, weekly, monthly, whatever. And then the climate models take these into consideration, and they spit out their prognostications for the future. The Euro does this with its long-range guidance. The Canadian CANSIPS does. The American GFS has the long-range, which is usually 2 weeks. That's pretty long-range. But then the longer range with the CFS, the Climate Forecast System, the JMA, the Japanese Meteorological Agency, or Japan Meteorological Agency, whatever it's called, all of those, the UK Met, right? These climate models are getting better at giving us the bigger pieces of the puzzle that once you put them together gives you one layer of the entire mystery that you're trying to solve. And that is, in this case, for most of us, what is the hurricane season going to be like? And there is value in knowing this, that if it's looking like an active season, I think it just helps people to be on that mindset. What are we going to do about it? How do we prepare? Who could be at risk? Then we can start figuring out things from there. So seeing the big picture then helps you to plan for the details later on. And the profile of the sea surface temperatures is very important, and it's holding strong. Here we are, mid-February, 2 weeks away from March starting, and then at that point, like I keep saying, it's only 90 days till the season begins. La Nina firmly in place, very warm in the Atlantic Main development region, warm in the subtropics as well, and extremely warm relative to average, and that's very important, it's relative to average. If you go off of Nova Scotia in a little boat out here, sword fishing, right, and jump in the ocean, it's still cold, but it's warmer than it should be by about 5 degrees Celsius. And that is an extreme case right there. It really is. It's to the point that it's alarming how warm that is relative to average. It leads to less ice and more energy available. A lot of problems with that. I'm not kidding. I'm not trying to be, I'm just telling you like it is. You see something like that, that's a problem. It'd be like if you had 106-degree fever all the time, that would be bad. That's a sign that something's wrong with you. If your blood pressure skyrockets, look at it on a personal level, and then look at this, and it's a pretty big signal there in the Northwest Atlantic covering thousands of square miles that could affect a lot of people there. Something's causing that. Again, this is not the forum. I am not a climate change expert. That's a whole other discipline. It really is. You can dabble in it and look into it and speculate. And then there's some people that have no interest in it at all. They think it's just a big hoax. That's fine. You're entitled to your opinion. I'm just telling you that's not my forte. This stuff is, though. Recognizing these signals, and that is an alarming signal. It really is, for a lot of reasons. Look at the Gulf. That one area in the middle, it kind of looks like a jellyfish in there, doesn't it? Most of the Gulf of Mexico now above normal. I'm going to be really curious to see this little area right here. Tomorrow and the next day, I'll probably tweet it and zoom in on the cropped area of this that this particular product lets you do. They have different regions that you can click on. This is just the wide shot. But I'm guaranteeing that this is going to fill in with a lot of blue over the coming days. But this is interesting how this warm water is getting filled in to the central Gulf. I think it's because of the warm Atlantic. Your source water, the way the circulation works, is warm. I don't know. It's just times are changing. Stuff's warmer than it should be. There's no doubt about it. Anyway, moving on. That's an interesting signal overall, and we're only 3.5 months from the hurricane season beginning. And look at this. It's mid-February. This cold shot that's going to come down, especially over here, and to some extent up here, it'll chisel this away a little bit. But my goodness, we're only 2 weeks from March. And already it's 80 degrees Fahrenheit, 26 Celsius, all through here. It never cooled down in the south central Gulf of Mexico. There's been years, I can remember, not long ago, that the 26 Celsius isotherm, let's use white to really make it delineate here, would be tucked away all down here. And, it's not that big of a deal, but look, it's all the way up, all through here is warm now. Well ahead of schedule. Implications for possibly early season mischief in the Gulf, sure, but more so for storms now, banging on the table. Storms now, spring storms, the spring severe weather season, the flood season coming up. I mean, that's why this is important. We look at hurricanes as the sort of the Super Bowl of everything, but these are your regular season games, is my analogy here. This is the other stuff. That all these pieces get put together, and it leads to what we watch for during the hurricane season. One more thing, and then I'll let you go. This is from Ben Knoll, and this is just another look at it. He's plotting this data from the North American Multi-Model Ensemble, and he's noticing that the La Nina is persisting, as the model shows, in a warmer than average Atlantic as we approach the hurricane season. He says it's early, but the chance for another active season is rising. The signals are there, and this is undeniable. This is the science. This is real. We saw it last year. And then he goes on to show that the rainfall anomalies here setting up are even higher, wetter anomalies for this next hurricane season than what we saw last season. So the signals are starting to fall into place that we really better take this seriously and be ready individually, our businesses, our homes, our communities, and our country, because we could be suffering a lot of damage and a lot of problems. We might not. That's the part we just don't know, admittedly. But I think, again, I've said it before, it's a blessing and a gift that we can have the foresight like this to see the weather coming for us, even when it's foul, not necessarily good news. Earthquakes, look, we just had a very powerful earthquake in Japan and very close to the same area that they were devastated in 2011. Remember March of 11? And there's no warning for those to speak of, not like we have with these big storms, these big impact winter storms, the hurricane season, and even severe weather outbreaks when we get a big severe weather outbreak of tornadoes. Don't look at this as doom and gloom and hype. Flip it around, be optimistic here, and look at it as, hey, we have science and math and meteorology, which are all kind of the same, on our side. And social media, YouTube, I'm trying to tell you all this. There's some other great people out there that you can follow. You know who they are. And we can tell you what's coming before it even gets here. And then you can at least be mentally prepared and then hopefully physically prepared when that nasty weather does arrive. All right? So let's just try to paint it in the right picture. Yes, there might be some yucky weather coming, but we know it in advance, and we can be ready and look at it in that optimism instead of the glass being half empty. That's just how I am. All right. Well, that is about it from me. Don't forget, I am on Twitter. @HurricaneTrack is my Twitter handle. The HurricaneTrack brand on Facebook. And, of course, we are funded almost entirely through crowdfunding, through Patreon. The link to learn more about that, what you get, some of the benefits. And, by the way, we are going to be launching a revamped campaign, a lot of new things coming online. I will announce that in March. We will begin at that point our 90-day stretch before the hurricane season starts, a lot of projects, and we will be using our crowdfunding a lot going forward. And if you want to become part of that, there are plenty of benefits. It's more than just a subscription service. In fact, it's not that at all. Patreon.com/HurricaneTrack. Discover it for yourself and become a part of it. You won't regret it. All right, well, that is it from me for this week. 2.8 million of you in Texas probably don't have power, and you have to see this video later. All kidding aside, do stay safe out there, stay warm. Don't drive anywhere until the sunshine comes out and melts everything, please. Got to keep you safe so that you can watch these videos, right? All right. Have a good rest of your week. I am Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com. We'll do it all again, hopefully with better news, at least for the cold side of things, next Monday.